Attack on Titan has been one of my most enjoyed animes for the last couple of years now. It has brought some of the best moments of both music, animation, storytelling, and character development that any anime has ever seen. So to think that the show is on its final season and last chapter of the manga, it's both exciting yet saddening. Or at least that's how I felt at first. Watching the first part of the final season was a roller coaster of emotion. Some were amazing and others were downright disappointing. In a way, the season is worth talking about, but a lot of the wrong reasons. Some reasons people seem to ignore. Now, before you think this is just going to be some type of hate piece and just whining and complaining about the series, this is not going to be it. Yes, I have my problems with this series, but I am not going to react like this was a personal attack or me calling for the deaths of those involved. I am more civilized than that, but I want people who will watch this, who are fans of that, who blindly take things for good production just because you like it. That's not the way to go either. I'll explain a little bit more about this idea later in the video, but for now, let's just jump right into the discussion. This is going to be a pretty con-heavy video, so I do at least want to give some pros before I go into any of my gripes with the show. First off, while yes, I did have my problems with the show, I actually had fun watching it. I popped when Eren turned into a Titan when he was in Marley. I was excited to see Levi again. Seeing the whole cast was fun, along with many other things in this series. Even with my problems with the show, it still captures some excitement in terms of pure enjoyment. Plus, with everything that's been built up to this point, if you have been keeping up with the show, it would be hard not to see so many things get paid off, along with other things you would have never expected to see during the show. As always from the series like Attack on Titan, the music is still the best point. I wasn't really a big fan of the opening song at first, but after a while I found myself jamming out to it during every opening and adding it to my Spotify anime playlist. The overall sequence as a whole I'm still not too big on. It's definitely colorful and nice to look at, but I wouldn't say it truly embodies what a final season opening should look like. With that being said though, knowing that this won't be the final opening of the show does make me look at it in a whole different light and makes me back up some of my criticisms. The overall soundtrack, however, is arguably the best the show has ever produced. This has so many memorable and banging numbers that I can't really count them all. Maybe it's just the feeling of the show coming to an end, but the music just hits harder watching some of these scenes. It really helps elevate the intensity and impact that some of these scenes should get. There are some scenes where maybe not having music would have been a better choice for the audience to truly sit there and absorb exactly what's been happening in the scene, but that doesn't happen nearly enough for it to truly be a complaint. For what it's worth, I did find the overall animation to be pretty good for anime standards. There is a dip in quality when you compare the animation from the last 3 seasons with the animation to the current one we have now, but it is a new studio, so that is to be expected. However, they did very well with the overall look at the character designs, and they did a fantastic job in terms of background and architect design. I even got myself being impressed with the work they put out. Well, most of it, but we'll get to that conversation later in the review. Again, it's not like the other 3 seasons, but I'd still put this up pretty high in terms of regular anime standards. I do have other positive things to say, but they will come with some caveats, so I think it's time to head into the con narrative of this discussion. The story actually had some very good foundation and some really good ideas in play, but the overall execution of the story did not do that justice. It doesn't help that they cut out parts from the manga that would have made this a more structured telling of the anime. Not to mention that the story felt like it was rushing through a lot of the material. Even time spent looking at the Marley Society, while even I think they spent way too much time on that, I still feel like we could have paced it enough to where we gave them the same amount of time, but also give a better idea and interpretation along with the feelings of the Eldian and Marleyan people. But even with that, I feel like the biggest problem with the show is how sporadic and disjointed it felt. I feel like at times we were hopping back and forth so much just to explain certain events, which fine, I have no problem with flashbacks and going back in time so much as long as it doesn't really disrupt the flow of the show. For example, I really do like the episode with the backstory of Zeke to truly understand what roots his goals are in other than him just being an Eldian. But there are some where it feels like we could have told things beforehand where we are wasting episodes and precious time doing so, such as the whole flashback with our characters in Paradise preparing to get ready. Now, I'm not saying this wasn't needed. In fact, it's crucial for us to really understand the place in which Paradise is in after the attack, but you're telling me that they couldn't have taken the first few episodes to explain this rather than go through the whole thing with Marley? Look, I get it. It seems like I'm just being nitpicky, but story structure is really important because it helps your watchers or readers follow a concise story without feeling like it's being lost. And what what this show does is constantly go back and forth rather than just staying on a straight path. Yes, you don't need to stay on a linear path, but if you're going back and forth to the point where there's no real structure, then there is a problem. And that's really my only problem with the first half. The second half for this I actually enjoyed quite a bit because we got back on a path. My other complaints still stand, but I was nowhere near confused or annoyed than I was at the first part. Honestly, if they switched up parts they told into a more straightforward story, I don't think I would feel as negatively towards this season. Even just moving the time skip later in the show and showing the other countries coming to Paradise beforehand would have made for a fairly sound show, even without really changing anything else. They did choose to follow the manga for this, so I guess in terms of story structure, that complaint could go to the manga, but for cutting out parts of the manga, that still should be held against them. But this broken structure didn't just hurt the overall storytelling, but the character development for the show as well. I actually think that there are a lot of interesting character dynamics in this season that play off really well with others to give us tense moments that leave us at the edge of our seat. But these scenes miss us out on so much potential with the lack of actual character progression being seen in the show. I think characters like Mikasa work because her goals are pretty straightforward. Her own views wouldn't necessarily change due to the events beforehand, so it makes it entertaining to see her interacting with the current situation, and someone like Reiner who feels like he's been hiding his feelings, and just now we're getting to see his feelings towards his action that he's done come back to haunt him and bubble up in the surface. However, not everyone is going to get this kind of treatment. As I mentioned before, part of the reason why some characters are harder to get into is because of the poorly structured telling of the story. But another big reason, which didn't affect the story as much, but did affect the character development, is the lack of info. There are characters who really falter due to either some info not being told properly, or just not being told at all. Eren is someone who over time I actually appreciated this character. He was one of the mysteries in this show as we went through, wondering exactly what made him change, or what drove him to make him do some of the decisions he's made so far. However, the reveal of those felt a little lackluster and didn't really feel like they were told properly. Now, I don't feel too aggressively about this because there may be some things about Eren's character that we just don't know yet. I haven't read the manga, but I do plan on it, so maybe there is more to it than meets the eye with his character. Though I do wish they did a better job of portraying that through the show, rather than just looking like he's just all in for Zeke and his plan, since I find it kinda unbelievable that he would turn so easily against Mikasa and Armin after everything they've been through. Though if that is the case, I'd be a little furious since he turned so easily on his friends without feeling any remorse, something that hasn't really been shown since the season. Though if we were talking about characters who truly feel like they could have been benefited from more background info being told about them before the events of Marley and so on, those would be Armin and Sasha. Armin was pretty much picked by Eren at his death to be the next leader of the Scouts. Even though it's Hanji, Armin was put as one of the big saviors and someone who could really push the Scouts to a new place. But it doesn't really feel as impactful if we are just told he's been doing a great job rather than seeing it. Yes, we do see him lead, but it would have been far better and more interesting actually watching Armin for a full season struggling with not only the position of being a leader, but also dealing with the weight of responsibility that Erwin put on him right before he died. To be able to follow a struggle to a person that he's become now would have been amazing, yet we only really get told about how good he is, which is less impactful. Yes, he acts differently, but just because he acts differently doesn't mean he's now a great character. It just means he's changed. It feels sudden and honestly a little earned in the series. And yes, I know Hanji is the actual and true leader of the Scouts. And don't get me wrong, she could have used a lot more love here as well. But for where we left off at the end of season 3, it feels so weird to leave Armin in the place that he's in right now. The same thing can go for Sasha and her whole crew that she's with for that matter. Before the events that occurred, we get told that Sasha, Connie, and Sean are all good friends. And most of the series, they are treated as sort of our B group to our main trio. And a little after that, we get the death of Sasha. And this is probably where I felt the most upset at the show. Not because Sasha died, although yes, she was the best girl on the show, and the fact that she got rid of is a cardinal sin and against mankind, but the bigger reason is because, well, it was just so out of the blue that death came out of nowhere. We know that the three of them are really good friends, that they're like family. We've seen it throughout the whole 3 seasons. But having at least that flashback happen before all of this and watching a potential relationship between Sasha and Niccolo form alongside other things could have made this a far more dramatic scene. I think that at some point, killing Sasha was the right way to go if you really wanted sympathy points, but the way they did it made it feel like a wasted death, and Sasha doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. She deserves far better than a death like that, and it really saddens me that they didn't give it to her. A lot of the forgotten info removed from the anime also hurt some of the new characters that get introduced into the series. Characters like Onyakupo and Peak are treated more like secondary side pieces rather than having the same presence they had in the manga. This I don't want to be too harsh on, since this is the last season and there really isn't much time for the creators to really give us the space to care about these characters. But even with what we were given, I still feel as if there was no real connection made. And unless you read the manga, you somewhat have to question why you should care about these characters in the first place. Characters like Peak I can get caring about since she plays more of a role, so while we don't get too much of her, she is a key person in having the story move forward. But Niccolo and Onyakupo are characters who should have been given more time to really build their characters and more time to actually see their relevance in the show, which sucks because there are a lot of characters who could have added so much flavor to the whole story, but instead they feel more like discarded pieces, which is really disappointing. But you know what else is disappointing? The CGI in the show. And before you question it, yes, I know I didn't talk much about Gabby, and this is my feelings about Gabby.
Fuck Gabby, 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 fuck Gabby.
No, but seriously though, I feel like Gabby deserves a whole video on her own, so for now I am going to leave her out of this review as I am planning something a little bit more of a separate thing for her. Now, I feel like I'm going to get two criticisms quite often for this review. One I will talk about now since it's relevant, and the other later in the closing segment of the video. There's probably a lot of you out there right now that are saying, oh, well, you didn't like it because you're not a fan of CGI in anime. You're a 2D purist. Okay, yes, if you talked to me back in 2016 to 2017, I was definitely a 2D purist. I believe that CGI would bring down the quality of anime that we would never have with the incorporation of 3D animation. And I am happy to say that I was so wrong back then. There have been many anime that have utilized the full process of 3D animation, and have found ways to fuse 2D aspects with 3D aspects so well. Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, Dorohedoro, Lana de los Trias, High School Girl, Knights of Sidonia, Beastars, Ajin, Promare. These are just a few of the anime that have used 3D animation so well, and I doubt we've seen anything yet to come. Sure, we have some duds like X-Arms and Berserker 2016, but there have been so many anime that have been able to enhance the beauty of their art through the use of 3D. Attack on Titan as Season 4 is not that anime. My only true gripe is with the first episode, and that looks like a pile of crap. I'm sorry, I understand that making these long shows and pieces is hard, but my god man, you really gonna make the Armored and Beast Titan move and look like that? They didn't even look good. They had no weight to them when they were moving. It wasn't great, it was honestly horrible, and it really put me in check as to where the show was really going. But like I said, I only really feel like that for the first episode, and they must have too, because the next time we see Titans going at it vastly improved since the first episode, and it kept improving onward. I still don't think CGI for these Titans was the best choice though. I can admit, not everybody can do what Studio Wit can do with these Titans. It probably took a lot of work, but no matter what way I look at it, it's still a step down from what we had previously. In a vacuum, yes, these are pretty passable Titans. If the Beast Titan during the second fight with Levi is how the Titans looked all the time, then I can live with that being the constant. But it's not what we've always been getting for the last 3 seasons. I know that it may seem mean to say that this was a downgrade to the previous creators. They probably worked extremely hard to put these together and give us the finished product that we have. And while this may absolutely be the case with the history and culture Japan has with its animators, to say that everything is just as it is a lie. I'm not taking anything away from these amazing people. They probably got given this in a short time and had to deliver something that would meet our standards in terms of animation. And they probably put everything they got into it. For the most part, I still approve, but to not compare this to the other seasons, or to just say it's whatever, is doing an injustice to the animators at Wood Studio as well. We don't have to bash or threaten the people who made this, but we should be able to critique and analyze things that need to be, rather than just letting it be. So yes, I think the CGI for the most part is fine, but it's nowhere near the level and beauty and grace in terms of detail and animation that we got before it. So I have said a lot in this piece, and with the second question I brought up, you've probably been asking yourself, Mise, well, you say so many negative things in detail. Did you really like this anime? Yes, I did. A funny thing about that, you can both enjoy and criticize something at the same time. I love Attack on Titan, and I had fun with this season despite everything I have said. I think the ending frustrated me because now we're gonna wait longer for the series, and I'll never understand why people do the part 1, part 2 thing nowadays, though I do have another piece coming out discussing that possibility of that. I think the fun factor of this was great, but people tend to think that things that are fun are just inherently great. But when I ask them why they think it's great, they usually just say, I don't know, it was fun, so it must be good. Not everything that is fun is good, and not everything that is good is fun. And I feel like Attack on Titan fits into this section. It was fun, it did a lot of fun things, it showed a lot of fun things, and I will be watching the second part of it for its fun factor as well. But I can't really give it such a high score because it faltered on a lot of things it excelled at before. I wouldn't say this was a former shell of itself, but it definitely took a couple of steps back from what it was. And to be honest, this does make sense. This is a whole different studio that does things differently, so there were bound to be some changes in the anime. Looking on the bright side though, I'm glad at least MAPPA took this over because I can't really think of many people who could have really done this the justice it deserves. Other than maybe like Ufotable and A1 Pictures, and even then I would have reluctance of having A1 Pictures take a property as precious as Attack on Titan. So, with that being said, my overall ranking for Attack on Titan is going to be a 6 out of 10. Well, that's the end of the video, and thank you all for sticking around so long. I know this technically isn't a big video, but my god, this was a lot for me to do. I haven't done a big one like these in a while. It's like a shit ton of editing, and I'm just tired and want to go to bed. But I do thank you all for sitting through all my ramblings, and I would like to hear what you guys think of Attack on Titan. I've seen a lot of people be positive, and if you're one of those people that want to challenge me in my views and my negative views in terms of how I view the show, then please go ahead and comment down below. If you want to check anything out and do on social media, all that stuff, my music, my podcast, all that stuff is going to be in the link description below, and I will see you guys in the next video, whenever that may be. Peace.